Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us from around the world. Welcome to Collections 2030 and Beyond, Activating Heritage Collections for Sustainable Development. My name is José Luis Pedersoli, Manager of the Strategic Planning Unit at ICROM, and I will be your host throughout this 5-day journey. Together, we will explore how heritage collections held in museums, libraries, archives, and beyond can be mobilized to support the 5 pillars of sustainable development: people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. This conference is the result of a truly global collaboration organized by ICROM, Apoio Online, the Association for Heritage Preservation of the Americas, the International Institute for Conservation of Historic and Artistic Works, IIC, and the University of Valencia, with support from many dedicated partners. We are grateful to all of them and to each of you for being part of this important conversation. Before we begin, just a few quick tips to help you get the most out of the conference sessions. You can find the full conference schedule, speaker bios, and presentations abstracts on the conference website. Please use the Q&A panel to share your questions and insights. We'll be monitoring it throughout the sessions. Messages from the organizers will appear in the chat. Please note that the attendees will not be able to post there, only in the Q&A panel. For enhanced accessibility, you can use Zoom's closed captions feature or follow the real-time translated captions available through the Wordly platform. Instructions have been shared in advance, and they are also posted in the chat now. Now, to officially open the conference, I'm honored to welcome the Director General of ICROM, Aruna Francesca Maria Gujral, who has been a driving force behind this initiative. Under her leadership, ICROM's Our Collections Matter program continues to champion the role of heritage collections and their conservation in advancing sustainable development. Please join me in welcoming the Director General live from Rome.
Thank you so much, José Luis, and thank you for your kind words and for being capable to collect this such an amazing initiative and group of people. Thank you for your commitment. And as you rightly said, this is more timely than ever. If it's not now, when? So I'm very pleased actually to open this conference, distinguished participants, partners, and dear colleagues. It is indeed a great pleasure to welcome you all to the Collection 2030 and beyond. I'm very delighted that many of you are joining us online today, from cultural institutions, government agencies, research organizations, NGOs, civil societies, international organizations, and the private sectors. Your presence today demonstrates a shared commitment to advancing sustainable development through the transformative power of heritage collection. As an intergovernmental organization, ICROM is very proud to convene this global and cross-sectorial dialogue at such a critical moment for multilateralism. We are already well past the midway point of the 2030 agenda, yet many of the global goals are not being met, and in some areas we are moving off track. The challenges we face today, climate change, inequality, conflict, and biodiversity loss, are reshaping our world and demanding responses that are not only urgent, but also collaborative, inclusive, cross-sectorial, and informed by diverse perspectives. Heritage collections in all their forms hold extraordinary potential to inform and support these efforts, both locally and globally. They are not merely a repository of the past. When well conserved and made accessible, collections become dynamic resources, fueling education and research, sparkling innovation, strengthening resilience and social cohesion, and advancing well-being and sustainable livelihoods. They can connect culture with science, health, education, environmental actions, and peace buildings, helping us to deliver on the global pledge to leave no one behind. The next 5 years will be decisive. If we are to realign with the 2030 agenda, we must recognize collections as key to the solutions we need. This conference offers us the space to unlock that potential together. Over the next 5 days, we will reflect on how collection can support and interconnect the 5 pillars of the sustainable development: people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. What makes this gathering unique is the diversity of voices in the room, from local policymakers to community groups, from museum professionals to students. This dialogue reflects the breadth of actors needed to drive real change. Let us use these 5 days not only to share knowledge, but to spark collaboration, inspire new partnership, and commit to concrete actions. Together, we can ensure that collections are not only preserved, but mobilized as drivers for a sustainable future. I wish to extend my sincere thanks to our co-organizers, supporting institutions, and all contributors who have helped shape this program. To those attending via Zoom, I encourage you to collaborate actively, ask questions, and share your perspectives. And to those following the live streaming, your engagement is equally appreciated. Remember that you are building a dialogue that transcends disciplines, sector, and geographies. The challenges ahead are huge, but so too is the potential we hold when we work together. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. I wish you all a very productive and inspiring conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director General, for those inspiring words and for setting the tone for what promises to be a transformative week. So we're having a small technical issue with the connection of the inaugural keynote speaker. So they should be coming live in a few minutes, but we'll proceed then with the program, and then we'll deliver the inaugural keynote just in a few minutes. So apologies for that, and let's continue. So let me take a moment to highlight the structure of this week's journey. The Collections 2030 and Beyond conference is built around the 5 pillars of sustainable development, the so-called 5 Ps of the United Nations Agenda 2030, which are people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. Each day, we will explore how heritage collections can contribute meaningfully to one of these pillars and how we can strengthen this contribution through intersectoral collaboration. Our daily program follows a dynamic format, which includes a keynote speech to kickstart our collective thinking for the day, followed by 6 lightning talks to inspire and spark reflection. Then we'll have a forward-looking intersectoral panel discussion to connect ideas across fields. And towards the end of each day, an interactive breakout session where you participants can engage directly with other participants and help shape the conference recommendations. To optimize time management and minimize the risk of poor internet connectivity, all presentations that we're going to show today have been pre-recorded. This ensures a seamless experience for everyone and allows us to focus on meaningful discussion and exchange. The speakers will then join us live for the Q&A session following the presentations, and we encourage you to post your questions in the Q&A panel as the talks are being played. When submitting a question to the speakers, please indicate which speaker it's addressed to. The intersectoral panel sessions and breakout discussions will be held live, offering valuable opportunities for real-time dialogue, collaboration, and co-creation. Throughout the 5 days of the conference, a visual communicator and storyteller will be capturing key moments and messages through engaging illustrations. These drawings will be reflecting the spirit and ideas of each day, offering a creative lens on our collective journey. You'll be able to access them on the conference website, so be sure to check in and see how our conversations are coming to life visually. There's also going to be shortly a partner matching section of the conference website, which has been created to spark innovative, cross-sectoral, and collections-based partnerships that can help strengthen the role of heritage collections and collections-based organizations in advancing sustainable development. As soon as this section of the website is ready, we'll let you know. So today we begin with the topic of collections and people. In the United Nations Agenda 2030, the aspirations for people are clear. to end poverty and hunger in all their forms and dimensions, and to ensure that all human beings can fulfill their potential in dignity, equality, and a healthy environment. So together we will explore how heritage collections can be mobilized to support this vision by addressing key issues such as multidimensional poverty, food security, health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, and more. We will also consider what innovative and strategic intersectoral partnerships could enhance this role. I have received information that our inaugural keynote speaker would already be connected. Can we just get confirmation from the co-organizers? Yes. Okay, so maybe we can then proceed with the inaugural keynote speech. So it's now my distinct honor to introduce our inaugural keynote speaker, Professor Alexander Santaki, the United Nations Special Rapporteur in the field of cultural rights. Professor Santaki is a leading global voice on culture, human rights, and inclusion. Her work challenged us to rethink how heritage and collections can empower communities, uphold dignity, and drive sustainable change. Please join me in welcoming the Special Rapporteur, Professor Alexander Santaki. Professor Santaki, the floor is yours.
Hello, I am here, but unfortunately my camera doesn't seem to work. So I'm trying to make it work, but unfortunately you won't be able to see me. I'm sorry for that.
Would you prefer to take a few minutes more?
Yes, that would be fantastic if I may.
So thank you so much. So we'll proceed with the keynote presentation for the topic of the day, and then we'll come back to you. Thank you so much.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, so let's turn now to our keynote presentation for today. And let me just share my screen here to introduce you to our dear speakers. So to deliver this keynote presentation, we are thrilled to have with us John Morris and Machiko Kamiyama. So they are from the International Research Institute of Disaster Science, Tohoku, at the University of Japan. And Machiko is also with the Preservation of Historical and Cultural Heritage Lab. So the presentation will be delivered by John Morris on behalf of both, but Machiko will be joining us for the Q&A. And you can find their full biographies on the conference website. Their work in post-disaster Japan reveals how saving heritage can support psychosocial recovery and strengthen community resilience. A powerful reminder that protecting culture is also about protecting people. So let's watch the keynote presentation.
Sorry, we cannot hear, José Luis. José Luis, there might be a problem with the audio. Can you check?
Yes, apologies for that. It's being checked right now, so it should be back normal in a second. Thank you for your patience and apologies for the inconvenience. It's been checked. Seems that we still have an issue with the audio. Okay, so we see Professor Santaki video is now back online. Yes,
Yes, please.
thank you. So maybe we can rewind and go back to the inaugural keynote's speech. In the meantime, we'll take care of the issue with the audio. Thank you so much, Professor Santaki.
Thank you so much for being so patient with me, and I'm really sorry. I think this shows how important it is that digitalization, AI, and technology are always complementary rather than, we use them instead of human rights contact. And this is something to take out from this at the moment. So I am delighted to be with you today in the beginning of this conference, and I am delighted also with the topic of the conference, which is quite close to my heart. So at the moment, I think that the world seems quite a hostile place, especially for the marginalized and the vulnerable. There is a lot of polarization, and people seem to kind of focus on extreme views, extreme opinions, and sometimes even extreme acts. We seem to have lost the empathy that we have for each other and for different communities. And it seems that we have gone to inside inwards, looking inwards at our own identities and at our own claims and at our own visions for the future, rather than allowing to understand better, to know better, and to be more aware of the claims, the histories, the traumas of others. And I think that this can only be fixed with more cultural resources, more understanding of our past and our history, of our own past and history, but also of the people who are around us and people who are further from us. The communities and also the individuals, and more interaction. And in this respect, I think that collections are really important. And we really, I think, have to adopt the cultural rights approach. And if we talked about sustainable development and cultural rights 15, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, unfortunately, people could not identify what exactly we meant. But I think that now we see more and more that the world understands and appreciates the cultural rights approach. So what do we mean about when we talk about cultural rights? We mean that we need to protect rights that protect the development and expression of cultural identities. At their core, they empower individuals and groups to express their humanity, their worldviews, and the meanings they attribute to their existence and development through various forms of human expressions. So they include a wide variety that are exhibit in collections. They include the ways that collections are being discussed and are being put together. And they include the actual places, so whether they're interactive, whether they allow access and participation to everyone or not. The cultural rights approach is very important, I believe, when we talk about collections and promoting sustainable development, in the sense of first adopting a wide definition of cultures and what we mean by cultures and what we mean by cultural rights. It is not only the exhibit of collections we know now, but it is also the participation, the visions we have, the priorities we have as individuals and as collectivities, and the narratives we have, and these have to be reflected in the collections and the way that collections are put together. When we talk about the cultural rights approach, we talk about participation that at times can be very far-reaching for specific sections of the population. And we finally talk about benefits that these individuals, but also, the artists, etc., but also the collectivities, the groups, indigenous peoples, minorities, etc., will benefit from these collections and from putting up these collections and displaying these collections and working, with the collections. And I think it is very important to say that not all international agencies have understood so far the importance of using the cultural rights approach. I think all international texts have to be interpreted having in mind the cultural rights approach. So having in mind the minimum standards that states have undertaken to respect, which is the cultural rights. I think it is important that already existing texts, for example, UNESCO texts, WIPO texts, etc., are interpreted with in light of the evolving standards of cultural rights. And I think it is also important that we use the soft but existing enforcement avenues we have in order to ensure that states do take measures to ensure that cultural rights are upheld. So how exactly can these be interpreted and applied when it comes to collections? Well, first of all, I don't need to tell you that collections have to be inclusive. In the official visits that I have made, I have specifically talked about how collections are still not inclusive of everyone. I remember very well that this was something that I noticed when I went to Germany on my official visits, especially when it comes to museums and national archives and national museums. So, entities that are very closely related to the state. I think there still exists a very top-down approach. Unfortunately, which goes to my point previously, the justification for this top-down approach, the justification that states give that they maintain this top-down approach is that UNESCO says that the national culture has to be protected. And a lot of states, including the states where I come from, Greece, will tell you that the culture is threatened. And I try to ask, why would the state culture be threatened? Ever since I remember myself. I really don't think that national cultures are being threatened so much as we say. If anything, I think it is the minority and the cultures of the vulnerable and the marginalized that are being threatened. And we have to ensure that it is these cultural resources and these narratives that are added, that are seen every day in the national museums, in the national archives, in the national libraries, etc. So first of all, I would say that it is really important for real inclusivity, which also comes to real representation. And by real representation, I talk about the interpretations and the narratives that accompany the exhibits. We see very often that these narratives are state narratives, and we try very hard to ensure that this is not the case. For example, very recently, I have a case of a state that I cannot name at the moment still, that in the Biennale decided only to exhibit objects with the state narrative that was quite different to the narratives that other collectivities living in the state have. So this is still very much this, what I said, this top-down approach. And the exclusion of the alternative narratives is very pertinent. So we really have to act on this if we really want to talk about sustainable development. Because when we talk about sustainable development, now we know that we do not only talk about economic development, but we talk about all collectivities and individuals feeling proud of who they are, feeling proud of their past, or understand what were the wrong things that happened in the past. And on the basis of these, they have the vision and they create, and they also evolve their vision for the future. So for this reason, I think that tackling the narratives is essential. And for this reason, I would say that representation is important. Now, there are two issues that I usually see. The first issue is the tokenistic approach. Of course, we're representative, because in a board of 21 people, one person is indigenous, one person is woman, one person is a minority, and one person is disabled. But this is not real representation, is it? So we have to ensure that we talk about effective equality, which means that sometimes these voices are going to need to form the prevailing voices. So I have been in states and in museums where indigenous exhibits are being shown in a fantastic way. But then when I ask how many indigenous peoples the experts interacted with, the curators interacted with, what they're going to tell me is that a couple. And I'm thinking, why, when we talk about free, prior, and informed consent of indigenous peoples in all matters that concern them, and when this is now an existing standard, why don't we have the same when it comes to collections? So especially when it comes to collections of indigenous cultural resources, I would now expect that indigenous peoples would have the lead. Some people say to me, well, yes, indigenous peoples in the same way as minorities, in the same way as, you know, other marginalized and vulnerable groups. And I think it is important here to say that this is why cultural rights are important. For example, in this case, cultural rights give priority to the indigenous peoples, more priority than other minorities and other marginalized groups. So when we talk about representation and when we talk about participation, I think it is important, first of all, to ensure that such participation and representation are going to be substantive, and second, and effective. And secondly, to ensure that specific groups have participation in a way that the international community has decided, the level that the international community has decided they need. Another issue is that we have to take into account intersectionality. So an indigenous woman is not going to have the same views and the same understandings of the past and the same stories that an indigenous man from the same reservation will have, or from the same group. And I think that we have to take this into account. And I think this is the only way that we can ensure that real sustainable development is guaranteed. I also think that we really have to ensure that these narratives and these understandings and the actual exhibits are revisited, because cultures are not static. Cultures evolve. And in the same way that minority and indigenous and all cultures evolve, the national cultures evolve. And we have to take that into account. I also think it is very important, especially in the light of the current situation, that we ensure that the exhibits and the way we, and the archives and the books and the amazing cultural resources that collections have ensure that they don't have a populist core, a populist message. And I think in the current international situation, this is extremely difficult because, of course, collections need to be seen, and museums, archives, libraries need audience, and they need people to come and like them and get passionate about them. And unfortunately, the populist message is one where one can get more passionate than the nuanced messages that sometimes these real narratives, these narratives that represent all dimensions have. So I think that this is very difficult, but I think that we need to be aware and we need to take it into account. So no populist messages. Sustainable development exists to reverse inequalities, stereotypes, and prejudices. And I think collections have responsibility to do this as well and to change social norms. So at the moment, in addition to populism, I see two more issues that are very difficult for collections and the sustainable development in general. The first one is difficult cases of exhibits from people who we now know have actually violated human rights. They're not the heroes we thought they were, but they were actually the oppressor, the colonizer, the one who encouraged slavery. And I think there, again, black or white and extreme measures do not work well. So I think that collections and collectors have to reflect carefully what would be the best message, not to hide the atrocities and the human rights violations that have happened in the past. So very often, not to hide these exhibits, but maybe to have them somewhere and explain why we are not as enthusiastic as we may have been about these exhibits 20, 30 years ago. The second big challenge that I know a lot of you face is digitalization and AI. And I think that in my report, which comes out in October, in a few days, but also in the digitalization report that I discussed with the United Nations last year and the civil society, I focus on two issues. The first issue is what I said at the beginning, that digitalized copies can never be a substitute for the real copies, for the real exhibits, for the real books. They can only be complementary. And we have to take into account still the divide that exists, the gaps that exist in the world, the narratives that are pushed forward, etc. The second principle is that we have to ensure that these decisions are made by the communities themselves and the source communities and the cultural communities, the cultural sector. And certainly they're not made by big companies whose main aim is to use collections and exhibits for more money. So I think these are the two principles that I find as my guiding principles when it comes to AI and collections. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about the future. So I think I said that the future in Mondiacult, where a lot of us are going to be next week in Barcelona, thank God we will hear a lot finally about cultural rights. And I think this is a fantastic step forward. And I hope, my mandate has made a contribution to this step being taken by states. But what we do need is, first of all, as I said, international bodies to interpret their existing documents and their existing guidance in light of cultural rights. And the first and the second issue is that we need cultural rights or the culture to become part of the post-2030 agenda. The reason why we need this is because we need culture and cultural rights to have targets, to have aims, and to be in the attention of states. The previous time, the Sustainable Development Goals did not have culture as a standalone goal. And the main argument was that, first of all, that culture oppresses, which I hope now, and certainly my mandate, has shown that culture may oppress, but also culture transforms and inspires, and it's essential for each one of us being steady on our feet about who we are, who we have been, and who we want to be. So this argument, I hope, is not taking traction anymore. And the second argument why the culture was not a standalone goal was that it's okay, culture is everywhere, and culture should be mainstreamed in all the development goals. Well, first of all, we've seen practically that this has not happened. In very practical terms, culture was pushed aside. And secondly, gender equality has also to be mainstreamed, but we do have a gender equality as a standalone goal, right? So I think this is a non-argument. It can be both a standalone goal and of course, mainstreamed through the other goals. So this is why we go to Barcelona to convince states and everyone that it is very important to have culture as a standalone goal for real sustainable development that includes our identities and includes evolving our identities in the way we want and in the way that is also conducive for social cohesion and all of us living together. Collections and people who work with collections have a very important role to play in this respect. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Santaki, for this powerful and thought-provoking keynote that challenges us to rethink our approach, not to collections development, management, and use, not to, if you really want to contribute to sustainable development, and also bringing the topic of a standalone goal for culture. Thank you so much. I'll invite the Director General of ICRAM to react to the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, José Luis, for giving me the floor again. I don't want to take too much of your time as the agenda is packed and with a lot of interesting topics to be discussed ahead, but I couldn't leave the meeting without thanking you, Special Rapporteur Santaki, Alexandra. You gave us so much food for thoughts. I would say I wanted to react and to give a lot of personal reaction to what you said. One, I can tell you that we will continue our discussion in Barcelona, where I will be, and it will be a pleasure for bringing these points forward together. I totally agree with you. We need to, anyway, it's not easy now to react to the entire excellent inputs that you gave us, and I hope this coming days, colleagues in this virtual room will actually reflect a lot on what you just said. From where I sit, leading an international organization, I think we do have a big role to do this type of engagement together. I'm not contradicting that we are in a too much top-down framework. Yes, we do, but the top-down needs to be informed by the bottom-up. I think that this type of conversation, what we're doing today, what we'll do in Barcelona, what we have been doing the past couple of years, I can tell you that I say the same at the G7, the need for a standalone goal for the post-2030 agenda. We have constantly repeating the G20. So we need this framework still, but those frameworks need to be fed by the bottom up. So I don't see either or, but because the local knowledge and the bottom up knowledge need to inform still the national and international framework. So here we go, where policy makers still need to be told the right narrative. The right narrative is the narrative that we want to advocate for, is a comprehensive one. Without, of course, entering too much in detail, I was discussing last week in the another conference talking about how conventional wisdom is created in people, and culture, arts can definitely be a very important driver for creating a neutral conventional wisdom, in the sense that sometimes we have imposed conventional wisdom to go to the point of culture. Culture can offer those lens to the people to read things differently. So we need to make sure that there is not hierarchy in culture. Sometimes we do even passively or unconsciously live in a situation where information, media, and other systems do impose us the conventional thinking. So I think that obviously for what you said, and I totally believe in this type of efforts, we need to make sure that we will stop talking about indigenous knowledge as a minority. So this is our objective, where we need to make sure that indigenous people and other aspects that you mentioned, gender and so on so far, do sit at the same table. All aspects do offer solutions to the bigger agenda. So I hope I was succinct but clear enough to say that we still have a lot to do. In the room, I see people that work in food security, in agriculture, poverty reduction. That has been done in the past. Now we need to bring culture at the same table. I think Mondia Cult is an excellent platform, but let's take advantage of this gathering, because I strongly believe that collection, as you mentioned, museum and others, do really offer a completely new narrative, and we need to be ready to embrace it. So as I was saying before, there is no hierarchy in culture, and history has to be told in all ways, from history to local demonstration of identity, etc. So I think that we as practitioners, but also advocate of this, we have a great responsibility and an honor to bring this narrative forward. And I think the time has arrived to make the step to be more bold and talkative about all this important thing, because identity and social cohesion are more needed than ever. So thank you so much. Sorry for taking a lot of time. I didn't want to do another speech, but you gave me a lot of great inputs, and we continue the talking. Thank you, Jose Luis, and I wish you very much a great productive discussion. I look forward to seeing the outcome of this important conference. Thank you again.
Thank you, Director General, and a heartfelt thanks to the Special Rapporteur Santaki for setting the tone for what promises to be a transformative week. Thank you so much. Now, it seems that our technical problem has been solved with the audio, so we will proceed with the keynote presentation by John Morris and Machiko Kamiyama on the topic of saving heritage is about saving people as well. So let's watch it.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am John Morris. I'm a historian of Japan, and together with my wife, Kamiyama Machiko, we have prepared a presentation on what is first aid to cultural heritage, unraveling how and why saving heritage can save everyone. I will begin my presentation now. First of all, a turning point for rescuing heritage was the Sendai Framework 2015-2020, which linked heritage to DRR. The framework identified cultural resilience of persons as something in which people, governments and other the private sector should invest, because this will do many things, among which saving lives and ensuring an effective recovery and habilitation are very important. Furthermore, it states that public and private sectors need to protect or support cultural and collecting institutions and other sites of historical, cultural heritage and religious interest. After this, heritage workers were able to claim that rescuing heritage should be an important part of any country or anyone's plans for dealing with disasters and other problems. However, how many people really understand this? I would like you to recall the triple disaster that hit Japan on the 11th of March 2011. The earthquake which started the disasters was here, and Machiko and I live here on this red line on the coast. What I'm going to tell you today is a distillation of our experiences, both as specialists working in heritage and in clinical psychology, and also as two disaster survivors. First of all, after the disaster, the Miyagi Shiryo-net, of which I am a member, conducted 105 salvage operations throughout Miyagi Prefecture, which was the area worst affected by the disaster. You can see that many of these operations were conducted on the coast. So, what did Mr. X say to MNS staff when we visited him to offer to rescue his family's historical heritage? People first, you idiots. Not everyone understands the importance of rescuing heritage. Who understand it? These people understand that heritage is important and that it can support people in times of stress. These people also understand that heritage is very important and it can be used and abused as a rationalization for oppression, social division, and dispossession. Remember, we need to remember that heritage has this duality. Who does not understand that heritage is important? In many cases, the people responsible for disaster risk management do not understand or cannot understand why heritage can be important. And we need to be able to explain to them why it is important. So, getting down to fundamentals, why are they relevant? And can culture and cultural heritage save lives? The answer to both questions is yes. The key word here is psychosocial support. Psychological support versus psychosocial support. Psychological support is restricted in scope. It targets people with problems and it can only be done by qualified specialists, and it runs the risks of stigmatizing people with problems as being problem people. On the other hand, psychosocial support, by relieving post-crisis stress, it can save lives. People don't commit suicide. It recognizes that post-crisis stress can best be relieved by connecting people with other people. In other words, psychological support is embedded in social relations, which is why we call it psychosocial support. It provides universal support, can be done by anybody, and can be incorporated into almost any form of relief or support activity. The key concept for understanding psychosocial support is resilience. Individuals, communities exhibit resilience when they adapt to a disturbance of their environment or adapt to adversity. It's adaptation. So it is neither an individual trait, nor it is an ability or kind of strength. And whether resilience develops or not depends on many different systems upon which the individual or community is embedded. In other words, relationships with people and with things, with the environment, all sorts of things. Since there are many different factors which can support resilience, there are many different paths to resilience. FAC cannot save everyone, but that is not a problem. Because resilience depends on the systems which support people. To be effective, psychosocial support must be systemic, integrating or coordinating itself with other concurrent forms of support, and should also be incorporated into the overall planning for disaster risk reduction at all levels. Because there are so many different forms of support to reach all kinds of people, you need many different kinds of support. And linking culture and heritage with psychosocial support will promote resilience, which will then save lives after disasters and promote people's and communities' recovery. Basic on psychosocial support, these two. They give clear advice for non-specialists on the do's and don'ts of humanitarian aid. You should read these before you begin any humanitarian aid so that you don't do any harm. Remember, we were also recipients of the aid. Psychosocial support applied to cultural heritage. The most important text here is ICCROM's First Aid to Cultural Heritage in Times of Crisis. It gives you guiding principles and concrete examples. It is a gold mine of concrete examples. Important principles are that it should be, FEC should be people-centered first aid. You need an inclusive attitude and respect for diversity. You need a context-specific response. There is no single form appropriate response for any context. Because there are so many different contexts, and you need to interlock culture with humanitarian assistance, and please do no harm. Okay, what is the difference between rescuing heritage and first aid to cultural heritage? When you rescue heritage, you focus on the object. For example, this wonderful coffee cup. First aid to cultural heritage, you focus on the object and the people or the relationships that converge or are brought together by the object. In other words, the people behind the object. So another problem is how do you define heritage? The Sendai framework sees heritage as being enshrined in public museums, and also as being something that is designated as heritage. This heritage commonly relates to memory and identity at regional, national, or international levels, i.e. what I call big heritage. But what about the undesignated memories of individuals, families, or local communities, and the repositories of these memories? In other words, little heritage. Which is most important? The question is misleading. The value of heritage is how relevant it is to people's lives and sense of self-identity and place. The big challenge here is to provide an objective evaluation of FAC. Heritage practitioners know from experience that heritage is important. Humanitarian aid workers know from experience that psychosocial support is effective. However, it is very difficult to provide objective third-party data to prove to DRR managers and other people that psychosocial support in general, and first aid to heritage in particular, provides effective support. A case study of first aid to cultural heritage. Machko and I have published a paper which provides objective third-party data measuring how the rescue operations of Little Heritage by the Miyagi Shiryo Network provided effective psychosocial support to the owners of the heritage. For details, please refer to the paper. I can't go into the details here because I don't have enough time. Excuse me. Okay, evaluating FHC. Psychologists, Machko and others, asked owners of private collections of documents to subjectively evaluate their experience of MSN's rescue of their documents. The words owners associated with their rescue experience were subjected to objective quantitative analysis. And throughout the interview process, the informants perceived themselves as active subjects whose opinions and impressions were valued. In other words, the interview process supported their self-respect and dignity. The main takeaways from the paper. Rescuing heritage, in this case, little heritage, can be effective psychosocial support and promote resilience. This is supported by data. The major factor affecting informants' resilience was the timing of the rescue. Rescues conducted 3 months after the disaster were less effective. In other words, rescuing heritage cannot be left until later. It cannot wait. Conversely, The severity and degree of damage incurred by the owners had little influence on the results. I can't go into the details, but some of them had terrible experiences. The owners were elderly with appropriate psychosocial support. The elderly can become active participants in community recovery. And a third-party evaluation can help heritage workers identify strengths and problem areas. So looking ahead, collaboration between historians and psychologists produced a synergy where the end result exceeded the results of either party working alone. It shows that it is necessary to incorporate FAC into the overall process of disaster risk reduction so that different kinds of aid can dovetail with each other. Doing this will produce better results for all. And some closing words. Why this obsession with disaster risk reduction? The DRR priorities of enhancing economic, social, health, and cultural resilience are relevant to building cohesive, equitable, inclusive societies anywhere, anytime. A society with poor resilience cannot deal effectively with not only disasters, but can't deal with any kind of problem or adversity effectively. And finally, please remember that if you go into a disaster area, aid providers will also suffer severe stress and need support. This is an important but overlooked aspect of psychosocial support, and that's why you need to read Psychological First Aid. Here are essential texts for on psychosocial first aid, and further, if you want to understand what resilience really means, I highly recommend these two texts. Thank you very much for your attention.
A big thank you to John and Mashiko for this keynote. So if you have questions for them, please don't forget to put them in the Q&A. They will come back live in a while for that, continuing the conversation. Now we're going to move into our lightning talk series with 6 presentations offering practical insights and inspiring examples of how heritage collections and collections-based organizations can support the people pillar of sustainable development in different ways, from aspects of mental health, gender inclusion, education, poverty reduction, food security, and beyond. So let me briefly introduce our speakers for this segment in order of their presentations. So we'll start with Emi Iwasaki from the Cultural Heritage Finance Alliance. Then the presentation that follows is by Fernanda Castro, the president of the Brazilian Institute of Museums, IBRAM. Then we'll have a lightning talk by Anne Aubert, who is the chief of publications branch at the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO. This will be followed by a co-authored presentation by Caterina Mavromichali, who is an archaeologist, museologist, and cultural mediator at the Hellenic Ministry of Culture in Greece, and by Professor Dominique Havstein-Franklin, professor of practice in arts therapy at Brunel University in London. And Dominique is also the vice president of the European Federation for Art Therapy. So that presentation will be delivered by Dominique. Then we'll have a joint presentation by Gabi Franger and Tidiana Jakovljevic from the International Association of Women's Museums. And then to close the lightning talks, a presentation by Claire Maguire from the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, IFLA. So let's start with Emi Iwasaki's talk, in which she will share findings from a global survey that ICROM conducted on how collection impacts on people's lives. If you have questions for Amy, just a reminder here, please don't forget to put them into the Q&A box for later discussion. So let's watch the presentation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Iwasaki, and for this lightning talk, I'll be sharing insights from an ECROM survey that sought to understand why heritage collections matter to people around the world, drawing for both a published paper in the International Journal of Heritage Studies that looks at the full results, and my master's dissertation from the University of Cambridge that studied the same survey dataset from a well-being lens. Imagine the world without cultural heritage collections. No more libraries, archives, museums, treasured artifacts in temples, cultural centers, and communities. How big a difference do you think this would make in your life? While preparing to launch the Our Collections Matter initiative, this is the question that ECROM posed to the global public in an open online survey. Offered in 22 different languages, the short survey invited anyone of all ages and walks of life to rate the impact of losing heritage collections on a 7-point Likert scale ranging from huge to no impact. Between October 2018 and December 2019, ECROM received nearly 2,400 responses. And as you'll see from these graphics, the survey reached diverse populations with respondents ranging from ages 9 to 88 years old from 103 different countries. In the two studies, we used mixed method approaches combining simple and multivariate statistical methods with qualitative analysis. And here I used a method called coding to thematically analyze respondents' own words around how collections impact their lives. Before moving to the results, I just want to indicate a couple of important points for interpreting the results. While our survey sample was diverse, just about 7% of respondents came from the Arab states or Africa. And meanwhile, a third reported working in the cultural or heritage sectors. Overwhelmingly, survey respondents reported that losing the world's heritage collections would significantly impact their lives. In fact, 81% of respondents indicated the impact would be very large or huge, while just 3% said that the impact would be small, very small, or none. Even when considering that those who took the survey likely had a greater than average personal or professional connection to heritage collections, the results were overwhelmingly positive. As for why people felt collections, and even heritage more broadly, impact their lives, some of the top impacts discussed included how they contribute to a sense of individual or collective identity, roots, and social belonging. Others discussed how collections help provide a sense of continuity over time, connecting the past, present, and the future. Many others valued collections as tangible traces of history and memory. This takes us now to the second study, which approached the same survey dataset from a specific lens of well-being. Here, I omitted all responses from cultural or heritage professionals and focused specifically on the three regions that each produced a significant number of responses: Asia Pacific, Latin America, and the Caribbean, and what we might call the West, which includes Europe, North America, Australia, and New Zealand. I used the same method of qualitative analysis to code each of these three regional subsets before mapping the resulting themes of impacts onto Linton et al.'s integrated well-being framework. While heritage is more often linked to social or mental well-being, across all regions, the top-cited contribution of heritage collections was surprisingly to the category of spiritual well-being, which is a marginalized dimension in broader health research. Spiritual, or what some call existential well-being, doesn't necessarily specifically concern religion, but more broadly the meanings and connections that give our lives purpose. For instance, it relates to the meanings we assign to ourselves, our identities, or to others in the world around us. It relates to a sense of connection to something greater than ourselves, and many discussed how heritage, art, and culture make them feel connected to broader humanity. For others, it was about time, feeling a sense of connection and purpose about the past, our ancestors, and future generations. So what does this all tell us about why heritage matters? The framework of well-being is useful in that it accommodates a broad understanding of heritage value, beyond just economic or material terms, and indeed while focusing on the value of collections to activities slash functioning, material circumstances and physical well-being might be useful in different cases, there are clearly real limits to assessing heritage value in these terms. To really capture why heritage matters to people, we need to better articulate the more abstract well-being concepts that heritage makes significant contributions to, including the spiritual, mental, and social dimensions. And with that, I've shared a bit of research very quickly showing how collections hold significant value for people worldwide, and some considerations for thinking about heritage values to people and societies moving forward. This is really just a teaser of the full findings, so I invite you to explore these studies further in your own time. And thank you all so much for listening.
Thanks to Amy, who'll be joining us for the Q&A shortly. So again, please, if you have questions, please put them into the Q&A box for the discussion later on. In the next presentation, Fernanda Castro, the president of the Brazilian Institute of Museums, explores how Brazil's museum policies, which are grounded in professional management and social participation, contribute to inclusive governance and cultural sustainability, aligning with global efforts to address multidimensional poverty through democratic access and participation. Again, if you have questions for Fernanda, please put them in the Q&A box and identify the question recipient. And with that, I think we can move on to watch Fernanda Castro's presentation.
Hi, I'm Fernanda Castro, a public servant with the Brazilian Institute of Museums, IBRAM, and currently serving as its president. I am a short, plump white woman with shoulder-length curly brown hair, and I'm wearing a blue dress. Today, I'm here to talk about how IBRAM has been working to expand social participation and to professionalize its structure and its public policies for museums in Brazil, fostering connections between people and collections, with a focus on developing museums and memory institutions as places for meeting, learning, and building citizenship and democracy. There are almost 400,000 museums and memory institutions in Brazil, and the majority are public or community institutions. For nearly 6 years, the field of culture and memory had been attacked and demobilized, and it was the people who make up these institutions who kept many projects and actions alive and resilient. Among their political and structural challenges, Brazilian museums have faced the COVID-19 pandemic, climate emergencies, and a period of political repression and scientific and cultural obscurantism. By transforming themselves into vaccination centers, food and supply collection and distribution points, or veritable training and organization centers for tackling social problems. In this context, social participation, consolidated through different mechanisms, legal instruments, and digital tools, has transformed the relationships between individuals and institutions, especially by changing collections into true representations of society challenges. Museums are created through participatory inventories, as in the case of the Hip Hop Museum of Rio Grande do Sul, the first in Latin America, which features a community garden, training courses for children and youth, and a community studio. The Museum of the Person transforms life stories into digital collections and connects different people and communities in the continent spanning country of Brazil, contributing to the preservation of languages, customs, and diverse ways of life and relationships with nature and environment. Traditional museums are not exception. One example is the National History Museum, affiliated with IBRAM, which over the past 2 decades has brought together diverse and historically marginalized social groups in memory to recount or reconstruct their stories collectively, enhancing and transforming one of the country's largest collections. IBRAM, with its 31 affiliated units, engages in politics at the forefront down to the museum floor, with the public and serving as a reference for all of the more than 4,000 Brazilian museums. In Brazil and around the world, we collectively build policies and actions that integrate people and collections, aiming to strengthen museums as spaces for building democracy and the collective memory of all. In doing so, our museums contribute to reducing multidimensional poverty nationally and at the community level, and to solving crises and acting to strengthen the SDGs and the 2030 agenda.
Okay, so moving on, the next presentation by Anne Aubert showcases how FAO's library and museum collections support its global mission of achieving food security and healthy diets for all, preserving cultural heritage and traditional knowledge as vital tools for education, policy, and sustainable food systems. So if you have questions for Anne, as usual, please put them into the Q&A pane. Let's watch Anne's presentation.
Good morning, good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be at the ICRAM conference. My name is Anne Aubert and I work for FAO. Today, I would like to share with you some thoughts on how FAO contributes to cultural heritage and helps people to connect with their traditional knowledge. And most importantly, how this knowledge can travel through generations. FAO and ICRAM share some key common values and have engaged in a dynamic partnership that bridges cultural heritage and sustainable development. And we have a strong emphasis on food systems and museum development in this partnership. In fact, at the heart of the collaboration, we have a FAO Global Museum and Network Initiative that will be inaugurated very soon on 16 October 2025. To mark FAO's 80th anniversary. This museum is called FAO Mune. FAO is a specialized agency of the United Nations. It was created in 1945 and it is dedicated to food and agriculture. Let me show you a very short video about FAO. So in addition to what you have seen in this video, I will add that FAO is a knowledge organization and it has a responsibility to disseminate and make accessible all the knowledge produced in all these years. The most reliable way for sharing knowledge is through publications. And I'm not saying this because I'm the head of the publications branch. We know that a publication compared to a website, a video, or a social media channel is a reference over time. It provides a sort of quality stamp of what was written on a certain date by specific authors and on a given topic. So we can say that publications have a long lifespan, and in fact, it has no limit in time. And this is why publications are so important to share knowledge. In fact, in the FAO library, we have more than 400 rare books. Some are from the 18th century. We also have manuscripts from Aristotle and Virgilio and a very special collection from China that was commissioned by Emperor Kangxi and published in 1696. All this knowledge has been collected over time, and after thousands of generations, it is still accessible. And today, with the technology that we have and the digital transformation that we have seen over the past years, this knowledge is also accessible online just by opening a browser. Our little treasure to make this possible in FAO is what we call the FAO Knowledge Repository. It is a platform that saw the light in 1998, so 27 years ago, and today it contains more than 150,000 documents. It is a place where all knowledge products published by FAO are accessible, and we are also digitizing all FAO historical collections so that we can cover all the knowledge produced by the organization in the past 80 years. As you have seen in the first video, FAO is celebrating its 80th anniversary, and I will show you another very short video on the museum. And it will just give you an overview of how it will be organized. So we hope to see you there. If you have a chance to come to Rome, please come and visit the museum. The purpose, as you have seen, is really to unlock inspiring collections for the world today and for future generations. I will conclude by saying that we are very proud to have a partnership with ICROM and to contribute to the preservation of cultural heritage. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. So look forward to continue the conversation with you in the Q&A session. This next presentation is co-authored by Katerina Mavromekali and Dominique Havestein-Franklin, and it reveals how creative engagement with heritage collections in museums, libraries, and archives can drive measurable improvements in mental health and well-being, thus positioning culture-based institutions as powerful allies in public health, social resilience, and sustainable development. So if you have questions for them, please don't forget to put them in the Q&A pane. Let's watch the presentation delivered by Dominique.
So good morning, and thank you so much for this invitation to present today. My name is Dominique Havestein-Franklin, and my colleague, unfortunately, Katerina Mavromekali, unfortunately can't make it because she's unwell. So I'll be reading her parts as well to include her voice on what's a very important topic. Yeah, so we're going to be focusing on this specific way in which creativity enables engagement, health, well-being, and so forth. Essentially, museums as guardians of our collective memory and catalysts for future innovation uniquely connects us with our heritage, challenges perspectives, and inspires new ways of well-being. So when individuals engage with museum collections or participate in gallery-based practices, they activate what neuroscientists term the default mode network. And this is important because it's the brain regions associated with self-referential processing, memory consolidation, and imaginative cognition. This activation occurs through what we have identified as 3 primary mechanisms. The first mechanism is sensory motor integration. So actually physically being there in an embodied state in relation to the arts. The second thing is symbolic expression. So how we begin to build nuanced representations of experience or of the world. And this collective meaning making, that this happens in a social cultural context, and the meaning making happens in situ. So as you are part of the exhibition or the collection, you are making sense of with those around you and with that particular environment. It's being reframed, so to speak. So, and this is something from Katerina, her pilot on art on prescription. This particular research program she's been focusing on over the last couple of years is about referral to non-medical sources of support within the community that may provide complementary benefit. It's a strengths-based and recovery-orientated and includes a series of community non-medical art sessions. She goes on to say, in her study, 384 participants with psychiatric diagnoses took part in structured, group-based art sessions across major cultural institutions. The data from the randomized controlled trial of the first pilot phase led by Professor Stefanis showed significant reductions in anxiety and depression scores compared to controls. So using this mixed methods, quantitative and qualitative focus groups, and arts-based visual research, her team found that creative engagement enhanced mental well-being by fostering self-awareness, empathy, and social connection. So Katerina and her team, the data also showed something which I think was really remarkable, that participants who received their first choice of cultural activity showed similar outcomes as those assigned alternative options. Fundamentally, this differs from traditional models of therapeutic practice because participants engage with existing cultural discourses. They're not trying to create something improvised and new just from their personal experience. We bring this into a wide, complex social context. The recent UK economic analysis shows that every £1 invested in creative museum programs, it looks like health economic data reveals that £4.43 in mental health service cost reduction. Yeah, so every £1 that's invested produces a 450% reduction in cost of mental health requirements. As we expand these programs internationally, we must remember that creativity represents humanity's capacity to produce hope and sensitivity where there's been pain or suffering. We believe that cultural institutions are uniquely positioned to nurture this capacity, to activate well-being and open pathways for change across complex systems and social environments. This requires innovative, high-impact partnerships, cross-disciplinary research and education, policy grounded in evidence-based evaluation, and strategies that link short-term initiatives with long-term transformation. So thank you for listening, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks to Dominique for delivering the presentation. And again, questions please in the Q&A box. So we'll move on to the next presentation, where Gabi Franger and Tiziana Sevic explore how women's museums around the world are reshaping the museum field in terms of using collections to challenge dominant narratives, elevate overlooked histories, and advance gender equality through inclusive and activist curatorial practices. Again, questions for the speakers, please do not hesitate to use the Q&A panel. Let's watch the presentation.
Listen to the voices of women.
In the museum field, it has long been recognized that the creation and management of collections involves more than the preservation of exceptional objects as testimonies to human achievements. It carries the profound responsibility of deciding what is remembered and what is forgotten. Collections offer not only access to significant artifacts, but also serve as entry points into personal histories, rights, and power structures.
Since the 1980s, feminist artists and activists have not only critically examined the value system that shape decisions in museological practices, they also explored alternative approaches to museology. They focused on questioning what is deemed worthy of preservation, whose stories have been marginalized, misrepresented, or erased from institutional narratives. These critical interventions emerged across various countries and led to the founding of the International Association of Women's Museums, IAWM, in 2008, and its formal establishment as a registered organization in 2012.
6 goals lead our mission.
To promote culture, arts, education, and training from a gender perspective.
To foster exchange, networking, mutual support, and global cooperation among women's museums.
To conduct research and the development of projects, exhibitions, new initiatives, community activities, seminars, and conferences.
To promote and strengthen the acceptance of women's and gender museums worldwide.
To achieve international recognition in the world of museums.
And to advocate for women's rights and a gender democratic society.
Collections in women's museums are thoughtfully created to highlight the diverse experiences, contributions, and creativity of women across time and cultures. They often focus on areas such as
local and global women's history and culture.
Women's artistic expression, both historical and contemporary.
Women's ingenuity and innovations in everyday life and beyond. For example, Josephine Cochrane invented the first dishwasher in 1886. At the World Exhibition in her hometown of Chicago in 1893, she won first prize for Best Mechanical Design. However, the award went to Mr. Cochrane, the name she entered under, as women were not admitted to the World Exhibition.
And such as personal narratives that situate small histories within the broader framework of dominant historical narratives.
To this day, housework is still considered a female task. Professional women often delegate a big part of their daily housework to other, mostly migrant women. Today, there is a chain of migrant women around the world who are employed primarily in the domain of cleaning, cooking, and caring.
Although women do not participate in deep-sea fishing, they play a major role in receiving cargo, marketing it, and processing fish into salted, smoked, and dried products consumed in West and Central Africa. They contribute much more than is commonly believed to family income and are active in the country's development.
Integrating a gender perspective into the interpretation of collections requires the continuous questioning of representations and the contextualization of objects within broader historical, social, and cultural frameworks. This approach reveals how symbolic gender identities, roles, relationships, and representations have been constructed, maintained, and contested over time. By addressing imbalances and making women visible in collections, museums can become powerful platforms for change and active contributors to gender equality. In doing so, collections move beyond preservation to serve as tools for advocacy, and the creation of a more gender-just society.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So big thanks to Gabi and Tiana, who will be also joining us shortly for the Q&A session. Now moving on to the last lightning talk, where Claire Maguire from IFLA makes the case for libraries worldwide as powerful drivers of sustainable development, showing how their collections, their spaces and staff promote access to information, lifelong learning, and cultural inclusion at the heart of the people dimension of sustainable development. So let's watch the presentation by Claire.
Hello, my name is Claire McGuire, Policy and Advocacy Manager at the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions. Thank you to ICROM for the invitation to give this lightning talk, in which I will present a case for how libraries, through their collections, as well as their spaces and staff, help drive progress on the people dimension of sustainable development. I will start broadly with IFLA's strong conviction that we cannot achieve sustainable development without a concentrated effort on achieving access to information for all. Since the negotiating process of the post-2015 UN Development Framework, IFLA has advocated for the role of access to information as an essential precondition for development. Without it, decision-making is poorer, democracy is weaker, and progress is slower. Without it, we cannot achieve social inclusion, equity, and human rights for all. It is essential to recognize that in the world today, this includes access to information both physically as well as in the digital environment. Meaningful access can only happen when there is universal connectivity, equity in societies, and access to the rights and skills to produce and use this information. Last year, IFLA and partners published the 2024 Development and Access to Information Report. It found that progress on connectivity is not matched by advances elsewhere. There is a huge need to promote a comprehensive and holistic approach to access to information. As memory and collections institutions, libraries are critical infrastructure for realizing this goal. With 2.5 million institutions worldwide, libraries have a strong track record of delivering meaningful access to information that leaves no one behind. This includes, but also extends beyond collections. Librarians are skilled information professionals who can be strong partners in increasing access to information, as well as the ability to use it and navigate the information environment. They can help people gain the information literacy skills needed to improve their lives. Their collections can have an impact across the development agenda. For example, libraries have curated agricultural research and data on how to make crops more productive and sustainable. They have provided public access to health and wellness information and shared resources to help people develop the skills needed for education and employment. Let's look specifically at how library collections support education and lifelong learning. I will point to 2 resources that establish a core understanding of the mission of libraries within this element of sustainable development. The updated IFLA UNESCO School Library Manifesto was endorsed in April 2025. It declares that the school library program improves and enhances teaching and learning for the entire school community. Their collections and the learning experiences around them contribute to active collaborations for literacies, critical thinking, creativity, and global citizenship. The IFLA UNESCO Public Library Manifesto proclaims UNESCO's belief in the public library as a living force for education, culture, and information, and as an essential agent for the fostering of peace and welfare through the minds of people. Collections in all types of libraries, from schools to communities to the national collection, help community members see themselves reflected in society. For example, libraries in countries that have populations of displaced persons, refugees, migrants, immigrants, asylum seekers, have made concentrated efforts to build the collection in order to engage these groups, both through collections in mother languages, as well as learning materials for new languages. And this brings me to my final point of this short talk, the role of documentary heritage in promoting inclusive, just, and peaceful societies. Collections can contribute to multiculturalism and linguistic diversity, peace building, and reconciliation. This can be achieved both through the materials collected, but also through the dialogue process surrounding the collections themselves. The benefits of documentary heritage cannot happen without the spaces and opportunities for people to explore it, to encounter these stories, to discuss and use them in research, and to inspire their own creative and academic pursuits. This is why our spaces and our people are so critical. From preservation and restoration to education and dialogue, it cannot happen without them. To conclude, having access to collections that reflect one's cultural and linguistic heritage is a part of the right for all people to participate in the cultural life of the community. This is an essential aspect of upholding human rights across the board and cultural rights specifically. As champions of freedom of expression, cultural rights defenders, essential infrastructure for access to information and knowledge, and spaces for dialogue and lifelong learning, libraries both contribute directly to improving lives within their communities and advocate on a larger scale for essential enablers of sustainable development, in this case, being knowledge, information, and culture. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, so with that, we conclude the series of lightning talks. I hope it's been inspiring. And as we saw, I mean, went across different aspects of sustainable development, from reducing poverty, supporting food security, gender equality, mental health across the board. So now I'll be glad to invite our speakers live in the room so that we can have continued the conversation and proceed with the questions that we received from the audience. So I'm welcoming back Amy, Fernanda, and Dominique will be there. Yes, Gabi with Tiana and Claire. So there you are. Big thanks to you for the contributions. And we'll have about 15 minutes for this conversation. So I'd like to start with the question for John and Machiko. If you could, from your psychological, psychosocial perspective, elaborate a little bit on how and why are we attached to artifacts? So what makes what makes them save lives? No, as you put in your presentation. What are the kind of psychological and psychosocial aspects that connects us with collections?
Thank you for a very difficult question, Lewis. How many seconds do I have?
I would say, let's say.
Right. First, the connection between people and an object. For example, I've got it here again, my cup. A person may like their object, or in a lot of cases, in the heritage that Miyagi Shileonet rescued, the people who held the heritage saw it as an imposition. It was something, it was just old collections of old paper sitting in their storehouse, and they didn't know what it meant, and they didn't know how to use it. The role of a professional is to help people understand the wider meaning of things that they may have. How does that connect to identity? Identity is like a number of T-shirts. You wear, you have 10 or 20 or 30 different T-shirts, and your identity is the sum of all the T-shirts you are wearing. And when people discuss resilience, they normally discuss it in terms of connections to people who are alive right now. What is missing in that kind of dialogue is that the way we identify ourselves is where we want to know where we came from. That, for example, I am 72 years old, but when I see myself, if I like my parents aren't alive, but if I met my parents, I would become a child. To my children, I am a parent. So who I am depends on what perspective I am looking at. And the heritage perspective lets you look back, and by looking back, you can also look forward.
Transform to that future.
Particularly in our experience as a disaster experience, but when you have lost all hope, excuse me,
It was very hard
with knowing that other people, that your forebears have suffered worse things, and that maybe your children will be able to carry on from you, gives you a perspective which lets you look beyond the adversities that you are facing today. That the connections with heritage, they can connect you to people around you, but it also adds a dimension that is missing in much social science, and that is past and present. I think I've gone over my timeline, but I haven't answered your question, but do you feel as if you have learned something?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
We'll come back. So let's move on thank you, to a question to Amy. So Amy, given that the evidence that you've shown, as a result of your research, that collections matter to people. So in your perspectives, how do you think this kind of evidence can be put forward and used, to strengthen recognition and support for collections-based organization, as kind of important actors in sustainable development and in contributing to people's lives? Thank you.
Right. I think that's a really important question, because that is sort of the root of the matter of why culture and heritage and collections generally aren't more recognized or more in the forefront of sustainable development conversations. So as I found in the research, analyzing these survey responses from people all over the world, heritage collections and heritage more generally do contribute to a number of these broader well-being dimensions, including, social well-being, mental well-being, and spiritual well-being, which is a marginalized dimension of well-being, not just in heritage, but more broadly. And there has been a more of a movement to recognize spiritual and existential being as sort of a critical element of our well-being and our sense of purpose and our sense of meaning and connection in our lives. So yeah, I think that we just need more hands on deck. We need more research that looks at well-being and how heritage collections contribute from a more holistic lens. And that's the challenge, that's the difficulty of it's not so easy as calculating GDP or economic figures. We have to be creative about the ways that we evidence this data.
Okay, thank you so much, Amy. So we move on to a question also from the audience, participant from Pakistan, saying that the country's been facing devastating floods at present that not only are affecting heritage, but also the agriculture sector as well. So the question would be to how museums and agriculture can be connected in a way, to kind of help prevent or reduce the impact of such disasters. So what are the interlinkages there between agriculture and museum, to kind of foster more resilience and reduce these impacts? I guess this could go to Anne.
Okay, thank you, Jose.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think maybe sometimes we think of museum as a place to have a nice time and just sort of do something different, but museum can actually be extremely rich in knowledge and can be really a learning experience. And that's the way we see it in FAO for the museum that will open its doors very soon. is that really through the museum you will have a rich experience, and you will be able to understand, to connect, and to learn what you can do in different situations. So now you mentioned this question about, how you can do for agriculture, in particular in case of disasters. That's certainly a topic that we will address. And I think what is important through a museum is to connect all the dots together. So that, okay, you can have publications, you can have laboratories, you can have key events that will be live events, and that you can really participate and meet the persons organizing the events. You can have schools that will be visiting, and also through the future generations, we really want to make sure that they can, so they learn, but also they know where they can find the information when they need it. So today you have the problem of a disaster in Pakistan. Tomorrow you have another problem, and you know where you can go and find the information that can help you to preserve cultural heritage, but also to face the situation and to look at future solutions. So I think this idea of connecting the dots and making sure that the information is available virtually, because that's also important for those that are not able to come physically to a place, to a museum, like in our case in Rome. But then also to have direct experiences by visiting the place. So I think also in sharing this knowledge and making sure that we do something useful for current generation and future generation, we need to help the users to understand the question that they have. No, so maybe you're looking for how to improve the agricultural situation in your country, but you also need first to understand what is the type of support that you need. And so also sharing the knowledge is a way to have access to experts that can point the finger to solutions that have already been implemented in the past, that can help you to ask the right questions in order to find what you need. No, in the end, I think if you have too much knowledge and you don't know how to search for it, how to use it, it's not useful. So this is what I'm trying to say is not only, sharing knowledge, generally speaking, but also sharing it in a way that it is understood and accessible to everyone when you need it.
Thank you, Anne. Now we move on to Dominique. There's a question here asking, where can we learn more about the research you made about the efficacy of arts prescribing? And then following up on that, so how, from your perspective, how would you see the best or the most effective way forward to strengthen partnership between the heritage sector and the health sector to kind of do more and kind of foster a stronger use of collections based on the evidence you have gathered? Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for the two questions. So the first question was about finding the outcomes or results of the first stage of the study. So just to say, this was a study that I'm familiar with, and it's based on some of the work, or at least it's informed by some of the work that's happened in the UK around social prescribing. But in a way, Greece has done an amazing sort of job at integrating this within cultural heritage systems in ways that the UK is still working at. So although we have in the UK, and for those that don't know social prescribing, it's whereby If somebody has a social or personal or psychological issue, usually in the UK, the doctor can prescribe an event, an activity, or resource that would assist them in alleviating some of the issues that they're presenting. So it goes beyond the medicalized model and has been proved to be quite effective. So Greece has produced this amazing study. At the moment, it's 12 weeks as the first phase of the study, and you can see this in a paper which I can send out separately in terms of results. And although the results have a moderate effect or impact, it's their significance. We can see there's across all domains, which I think is very interesting: well-being, anxiety, depression. And it's a good example of where we're bringing in health methods and methodologies into spaces such as cultural contexts and heritage contexts to build better evaluation frameworks. If I'm going to go a bit further than this, and I think this is an interesting area of concern, is that health can also learn from the cultural sector. There's a lot more co-design, co-production, community engagement work, especially with community guardians and community leads, that can facilitate a better understanding of how we measure things. And what I mean by that is the conceptual groundwork, the way we define well-being, the way we think about ailments and issues and so forth, can be hugely, vastly improved by better communicating with the communities that we serve. To get to know them better, often these cultural institutions are right at the heart, right at the center of those communities, and also can develop new pathways for those that are harder to reach, let's say. At the moment, the UK government is working towards a better integration between cultural sites such as various institutions, museums, and so forth, and health. But it's a work in progress. So I suppose what I'm saying is there is a medical model which largely drives health research, but cultural institutions need to know how they can improve how we evaluate impact of on health and well-being and so forth. So yeah, there's two rather abbreviated answers to two questions, but thank you for those questions. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Now we move to Brazil with Fernanda. Fernanda, so we saw how the government is kind of changing public policies in terms of museum management. The question would be, are there other sectors involved in this transformation, to really kind of support and strengthen further the role of museums? And if not, what would you envisage as a powerful cross-sector or public private partnerships to really foster more and strengthen what you're already doing? Thank you.
Thank you, Pedesoli. Hi, everyone. Well, the answer is yes. The public participatory politics in Brazil are integrated with many ministries. We now are developing a MOU with the Science and Technology Ministry and also the Education Ministry, and everything is being built with participatory consultants and people are engaging in our actions, because we believe that this is how we make state politics, not governmental politics. We want it to be consolidated as public policies for many, many years. So to do it, we have to touch people's hearts, and inventory, participative inventory and participative politics are the way to integrate how the government makes these policies. So yes, we do it. We do it with different kinds of movements and associations with the social society, but also with the different ministries and subjects in public politics.
Thank you so much. Now there's a question for Gabi and Tiana. I think it's a very straightforward one. how can we join Women Museum Association, please? So what are the eligibility criteria?
Maybe I can answer because the request, I will definitely get through email that request. The criteria are just to be interested in women history, women culture, or art. We have individual members, initiatives for grounding women's museums or women's museums. Also, as individuals, we have also a lot of curators from mainstream museums. So it is just important to write an email with membership requests, and then I will answer further.
Thank you. Gabi, you are on mute.
But thinking about the full members, then if you want to be a full member, then you have to be a women's or gender museum, or physical or digital museum. But of course, we like to work together with all interested museums and initiatives on women's history, because what Mrs. Santaki said, this top-down history concerning indigenous people, for example, in mainstream museums, that happens to the women's too, no? Because we are less seen, we are, yes, if they talk about everyday life, we don't appear with our knowledge, with our what we can do, so with our art. So yes, we like to join or to invite all the interested people in women's and gender history, and not only history, also what they are doing in everyday life today.
Thank you so much, Gabi and Tiana. Great to see how the association was addressing directly SDG 5 for gender equality. So appreciate that. And then last but not least, let's go to Claire. And then the question here, Claire, is for IFLA as kind of the global network and a reference for libraries worldwide. So what tips would you have for kind of small, medium-sized libraries that really want to boost their contributions to sustainable development and also be recognized as an important player now for their communities? What kind of tips would you have for them? Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to everyone for this really interesting discussion. I think so much impact on sustainable development happens at the local level, and we can talk at the international level. We can work on, policy. We can even work at the national level, but the real work is so often happening at the local level. So I think small institutions can have an enormous impact. We see community and community level public libraries that are really working in communion with their community. And so I would say the first step in any type of library, whether they see themselves as having a heritage collection or not, can still be an actor here, right? So I would say the first step is really answering what the needs of the community are, and working with the people there, and working to see how they can be a space that can further the work that's already being done in the community, address a gap, and go from there. And in all the conversations I've had with public libraries and community libraries doing this work, it always starts there in a consultative process. And the second half of that question, I think, is really critical, because we do a lot of work and we don't always talk about the work that we do. So my advice is always to be keeping track, writing down, keeping quantitative and qualitative impact, or measuring quantitative and qualitative impact so much as possible, and working with policymakers, working with others within the community itself, at the city level especially, can be impactful, at the regional level, or at the municipal level, for example, working with the other actors from local government, from other civil society who are doing sustainable development work outside of the culture sector. There's a lot from the work IFLA's done looking at the role of culture in voluntary national reviews, for example. We've seen an increase in culture being represented, but we've seen a far greater increase in culture being represented in voluntary local reviews, which are reviews of how the SDGs have been implemented at the city level, for example. So being able to really advocate for the stories, advocate for the impact we're making is really important. And in that sense, I'll end with the importance, I think, of indicators when we're talking about how culture is impacting on sustainable development. Being able to, obviously, we can't measure everything, but find what we can measure and find how we can talk about our impact in the language that people outside of the sector recognize. And in connecting culture's impact to the values that are held outside of the sector, for example. So being able to speak a shared language is really important at any level. But I think we can do a lot of really impactful work at the local level. So I would say don't be afraid to get started at any level you're working at.
Thank you, Claire, and a big thanks to all our speakers for your thoughtful contributions and to everyone who shared questions and reflections in the chat. So if by any chance we did not get your question, please rest assured it's been noted and it will help inform the discussions ahead. So we had, because of the slight technical problems we had at the beginning, so a slight behind schedule. So we'll move on to have a short 10-minute comfort break now, before we reconvene for the live intersectoral panel, where we will try and connect ideas across fields in real time. So a big thank you to everyone, a special thanks to our speakers, and we'll see you here again in 10 minutes. Okay, welcome back everyone to this live intersectoral panel, where we hope to open a forward-looking conversation on the role of collections and collections-based organizations in advancing sustainable development. Today, with a particular focus on the people dimension, look at inclusion, well-being, and access through innovative cross-sectors partnerships. So I'm now delighted to introduce our panelists for this conversation. So we'll have with us Inga Surgunte, who is the head of sustainable development projects at the Latvian Museum Associations.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Inga, welcome. Bringing her perspectives from national and international museum networks. We also have with us Professor Cruciu Vatene, who is Associate Professor in Philosophy at the University of Auckland in New Zealand, representing the academic sector and bringing her insights on ethics, politics, indigenous philosophy, and collaborative transdisciplinarity, emphasizing the critical role of local communities for global change. Welcome, Cruciu. We have also joining us Tatenda Tavinievi, coordinator of an AI of our own project and founder of the AI for Cultural Heritage and Conservatech AI in Zimbabwe. Tatenda brings experience in international cultural policy, participatory heritage projects, ethical AI governance, and AI projects for cultural heritage management. And Tatenda is also sharing his perspectives from the different civil society groups he actively engaged with. And then our fourth panelist today is Alexandre Fernandes, the director of the International Institute for Environment and Development in Europe, bringing his expertise and perspectives on developing, monitoring, and evaluating cross-sector solutions for sustainable development. So a big welcome to the four of you and for our attendees. So you can find the panelists' full biographies on the conference website. So we are here excited to hear your insights today and reflections as we explore the role of collections and collections-based organizations in advancing sustainable development. So we'll have about 45 minutes of conversation, which will be structured around two guiding questions. For each one, we invite our panelists to share their perspectives. And of course, each panelist is more than welcome to react to the fellow panelists as they speak to other points. So with that, we need to have a dynamic and engaging exchange. And then as we start with the questions, I kindly ask our panelists to keep the replies to between 3-4 minutes, so that everybody has a fair opportunity to contribute, and then we can also leave time for questions from the audience, to which we'll dedicate the final 10-15 minutes of the panel. So if that's fine with everyone, so we can start with our first question to all four panelists, and then I go around ask your reactions to the question. Here it goes. From your perspective, how do heritage collections and collections-based organizations such as museums, libraries, archives, community centers, digital repositories, and beyond, how they currently contribute to the people dimension of sustainable development, keeping in mind that this includes areas such as reducing multidimensional poverty, supporting food security and healthy diets, promoting well-being and healthy lives for all, fostering social cohesion, gender equality, and beyond. So Inga, maybe we can start with you. From the perspective of the museum networks you work with, how do collections and collections-based organizations currently contribute to the people dimension of sustainable development?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for having me here, and thank you for this question. I must confess that the people dimension is my favorite one regarding the Agenda 2030. Because I am a true believer in the power of museums to create change for people on individual and on community level, to improve their social health conditions, to support diversity, inclusion, and I think that museums and other collection-based institutions are really, really perfectly positioned to make change in these areas because they are close to the communities, they are very local, very close to their users, and they have a lot of resources. And yeah, if I have to summarize, I mean, so many great case studies were already shared, and I can't say anything groundbreaking new. I can just really summarize, maybe also from the Latvian perspective. I think that in all of the SDGs that you, Jose, already mentioned, there is some very concrete impact possible. And I think if I compare from my observations and also professional experience, if I compare museums' work with, for instance, environmental sustainability, it takes a long time till we see change, this behavioral or attitude change. But when it comes to people and the social dimension of sustainability, it can be a very gratifying work because every time, basically, when you meet your visitors, you can create change. You can create this safe environment, this safe space where everyone feels seen, included, heard. So I would say one of the clusters, one of the types of activities for people from museum side can be categorized around the social cohesion and inclusion. And I'm very thrilled to see how museums are actually becoming more and more aware that their collections can be also exclusive and excluding, and how museums are daring to open up, to include more narratives, to also review critically what they have already collected and how they've been able to interpret it. And I think there's a great potential really for this social cohesion, for more peaceful communities, for more close connections on social level, and in the end it gives a more resilience to the local communities, which is then related to maybe a next cluster of initiatives that can be collected around well-being and health. We know that this meaningful social interaction and bonds are very closely related to mental health and well-being. But we also see that not only socially inclusive projects foster it, but also projects that are directly tackling mental health issues that are really alarmingly bad in all age groups, especially among young people. And we see that many museums decide very consciously to be places for healing, for learning about health literacy, including mental health literacy. There are great and very, very moving projects in war zones where people involved passively or actively in armed conflicts can then heal and rest in museums and with help museums and remember who they are and remember their already mentioned spiritual aspects of well-being through heritage, through belonging. And then maybe the third one, I think also the goals that are related to poverty and hunger, which might seem impossible, what can museums do about that? But we can actually see that on local level, there are many museums who are encouraging and creating circumstances for people to share their resources, to support very practically those who are facing challenges, financial challenges, and really lacking very basic resources. And we can see that museums can be this meeting place where we can hear the other who is in need and decide to help. And finally, of course, the SDG 4. And when we look at the final, the last 2025 report on sustainable development, we see that challenges still persist in all of these goals, including SDG 4, and museums as lifelong learning institutions that can provide trustworthy and high quality information can support better achievements, better results in this goal as well. That would be, in a nutshell, my very general intuitive, maybe sometimes feeling or observation about museums and sustainable development in the dimension of people.
Thank you so much, Inga. And just a reminder for our attendees, if you have questions for the panelists, please write them in the Q&A box. Thank you. Now, if we go to New Zealand, so the same question, crucial, drawing from your work in ethics and indigenous philosophy. So how do you see from your perspective that collections and collections-based organizations such as museum, libraries, archives, how are they supporting sustainable development, especially in terms of recognizing diverse knowledge systems and empowering communities? Thank you.
Kia ora tātou, ngā mihi mai o hā kia koutou I tēnei hui. Thanks so much for the invitation. It's been really fascinating to think about this. So I think numerous dimensions, and just to reinforce what Inga also said, I think numerous dimensions of the SDGs are contributed to just by virtue of heritage collections and collections-based organizations being people-centered, places where diverse communities meet, are supposed to meet, where engagements about culture and history and its role in intergenerational well-being, things like that, and broadly understood, can be discussed and cultivated and fostered in inclusive and also innovative ways. And I think all of this is reinforced in the range of partnerships that many of which Inga mentioned, with health organizations, with local artists, with Indigenous and other local communities, with educators, initiatives to include marginalized and other excluded communities too. But as someone who's interested in diverse philosophical traditions, and Indigenous philosophical traditions in particular, and the way that these philosophies are lived within communities and how they're recognized and represented, I also think that within the context of what we might call sustainable development, these organizations play a central role in helping us to understand and reflect on just what we mean and what we ought to mean by sustainability, by development, and the SDGs and the people-centered role within it. So here, I don't think organizations are just vehicles for sustainable development in the SDGs. Instead, they help us to think about and reflect on the way we talk about these ideas today. They help us to be really mindful of who these ideas are representing and how these ideas can include and represent or exclude cultures and the communities that we're supposed to serve. So I think organizations can play a really critical role in not just social cohesion, although that's important, but in the recognition of culturally diverse perspectives, culturally diverse practices for justice, and in the celebration of what you might call the rich cultural and ecological fabric that lay at the heart of the SDGs, that are meant to lay at the heart of the SDGs. And so I think heritage collections and organizations should show us how our rich cultural and socio-ecological fabric can reimagine the SDGs in all of the dimensions. And I think heritage collections have a central role in doing that for us. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Krashu. Now we move to Tatenda. Tatenda, from your experience at the intersection of cultural heritage, technology, and civil society, so how do you see collections, and maybe we can throw in, especially in your case, the digital and participatory ones, how they're currently helping reduce inequality, promote inclusion, and support well-being? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jose. I think this is one of the most interesting questions. When you start to think of collections within the realm of humans, of people, and again within the area of technology, I'll just use some examples from my experiences. So, for example, where I am now in Cambodia, we have seen that historically, when the Khmer Rouge wanted to destroy the people of Cambodia, what they did was to destroy the shrines, to destroy the human repositories. So again, when we go back to Africa, when colonization happened, what they did also was to destroy those human repositories. So how do we now position these collections in the present day? So the idea now is collections have been used. I think museums and other institutions, they've tried in as much as possible to engage the people, but to ensure that collections become #1 driver of peace. And I'll give an example of Cambodia, where peace has been used or has been achieved through collections. I'll also use an example of what they call the Popana Center, which is here in Cambodia, which is now engaging with indigenous youth to ensure that the collections, they are being used as a vehicle to ensure that there is peace, but also as a vehicle to reinstate the once lost dignity. So within the area of technology, this is also one of the key areas where also the ethics within the, I would say, for example, AI, they are now being shaped by these collections. Different areas or different technological experts that are now trying to use these collections to see how best can they be used to shape the governance and the AI ethics. So I would just say in short, yes, this is where we are. And I think we'll proceed as the conversation goes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Tatiana, for your insights. Now we move to Alexandre. I think from your vantage point now in sustainable development policy, so how do you see, from your work, I mean, being outside of the sector, how do you see collections-based organizations now contributing to healthier and more inclusive societies? Are collections in your radar? What does it look like? And then if you could share any existing evidence or examples that demonstrate their impact in relation to the kind of people dimension of sustainable development. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jose. And first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to be here today. I would like to actually build on the interventions by Inga and others, previous speakers. I'm thinking also particularly in the previous session, interventions by Amy and Claire on the importance of indicators and generating evidence. And I think coming from a MEL perspective, that's something that we're very interested in. And just to pick up on your question also, Jose, on how do we see the evidence popping up to demonstrate the role of collections in terms of the people's dimension for sustainable development. So there is growing evidence on the role of collections in delivering this specific dimension of the SDGs. Several examples have already been mentioned. So this idea of the role of collections and collection-based organizations in terms of public engagement and skills, museums, libraries can build literacy, climate literacy, lifelong learning, and direct links to other SDGs, also the link and the strong support to health and well-being that was already discussed previously, also this idea of social prescribing and the links and positive outcomes in terms of mental health. But what we see from a MEL perspective is that this evidence is still very scattered. So we need more robust evidence for the different SDGs. So some of this evidence covers a couple of them, but what we would like to see from our angle, the MEL perspective, is this: how can we generate more robust evidence to demonstrate the role of collections in contributing to the people's dimension? So I think from our angle, a rigorous methodological processes, MEL systems, indicators, as Claire also mentioned, I think that's key to further strength and to demonstrate the evidence and the impact of these collections. And we've been, together with ICROM and other partners, we've been recently building on the work that ICROM has done, amazing work with the Our Collections Matter. We're building on that work to develop these rigorous methodological processes to generate some of this evidence. We're working in a couple of projects at the European level. Maybe one that I can highlight here is the project called TauChat, which a couple of partners are here today. The project is called Transforming Our World Through Cultural Heritage and Education. And our focus, or one of the goals of the project, is to demonstrate and assess this transformative potential of collections-based organizations through a rigorous methodological approach that we can test and use to scale up to demonstrate these critical role of the collections in achieving the people dimension of the SDGs. So I think there's definitely an emerging field. We're very excited from our angle to bring and to connect these two fields together. And that will hopefully build in much more robust evidence to demonstrate this role of collections. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. Just for the colleagues in the audience that are not familiar with the terminology, so when you say MEL, so that stands for Monitor, Evaluation, and Learning. So methodologically speaking, which is at the heart of the work you do at IIED. So thank you for all the rich and thoughtful reflections on this first round. So I think it's clear that collections and collections-based institutions are contributing to the people dimension of sustainable development in different and meaningful ways. But at the same time, we recognize that potential might still be under-realized, and in some cases still shaped by legacies of practice that warrant a more critical reflection. The evidence can be still uneven or emerging, but we are working towards that. And there's a growing need to better understand and articulate, I think we can say, how collections can support all these aspects of sustainable development. Now for the next question, so I'd like to shift our focus to the future. So looking ahead now is the focus of the next question, which is, again, looking to the future from your perspective. How can we further strengthen the role and the recognition of collections and collections-based organizations in advancing sustainable development with a special focus on the people dimension? So what kinds of innovative intersectoral partnerships can you envisage? And what would it take concretely to make this happen? So maybe we start with Inge again. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe one step back. I think we should also still advocate for recognition of this whole dimension of sustainable development, because surprisingly enough, it is still when we say SDGs or sustainable development, the first thing that comes up is climate change and environmental issues, and not necessarily the human, the social aspect of it. So I think we have to do as much as we can to show that there is also a human aspect also in the environmental sustainability, talking of climate justice and etc. And then when we move to the collection-based organizations, yes, I think we have to be more active in raising visibility and recognition of our contribution to this aspect or this dimension of the sustainable development. And you were asking practically what would that mean? Of course, collecting data, publishing, being visible. But I think the hardest thing is somehow to, so to speak, break through the glass ceiling of our cultural silo, because it feels like it's within the cultural sector that we are kind of on the same page, and we know we do make change. And every museum person who has worked with vulnerable groups knows that we do make change in the lives of these people. But when we have to communicate with other sectors, it becomes difficult. And then maybe the next thing is really what Alexander was talking about, is being able to present not only stories, but also data, and being equipped with tools to be able to work very strategically, very professionally. Because I must say that a lot of SDG related work in museums and other collection-based institutions is done intuitively because of believing or because of having that activist attitude, but not necessarily being very strategically aware of tools, of outputs, how to collect, how to document, how to present it, to whom present it. And I think here initiatives such as Our Collections Matter by ICROM is really, really such a great support for the community who normally are coming from other backgrounds from their expertise in literature or in nature science, and we need this extra skills, extra knowledge. We need to equip our colleagues and ourselves to be more strategic. And I think the end dream would be that also not only the culture ministry is talking and is aware of the contribution of the cultural sector to the sustainable development, but also Ministry of Health, Ministry of Finances, because what we saw in the recent debates in high-level political forums for SDGs, when it comes to the debates on a separate goal for culture in the agenda beyond 2030, there is a lot of confusion from the other sectors. Although we think we are producing a lot of data and a lot of publications, a lot of evidence, it is still in our own micro universe that it is recognized and not necessarily seen and understood by other sectors. So my future dream would be that other sectors take us as serious as we do.
Thank you so much, Inga, for this reflection. Now, if you continue with the crucial building on that, so how can we reimagine partnerships that center ethics, indigenous knowledge, and community agency? So what would it take, practically, perhaps politically too, to embed these values in cross-sector collaborations involving collections and knowledge institutions? Thank you.
Great. So, I mean, as I've said, I think that heritage collections have a critical role to play in actually bridging and enabling diverse knowledges. Because they're sites of diverse knowledges and practices of knowledge making already, I think that's quite unique. So they have this unique capacity to recognize and cultivate all of this knowledge in its multiple and plural, and also in its distributed forms, its globally distributed, regionally distributed forms, already being at the intersection of diverse forms of knowledge. I think that's quite unique and something of a strength for heritage collections. Just similar to what Inga's just said, I mean, I think though in terms of culture and the role it plays in the SDGs, I think there's a contribution also that's critical to building actually not just recognizing the people-centered element of the SDGs, but actually building relationships between people and in the natural environment. I think there's a really critical role here, and in motivating a concern for future generations. I think that we can do this by looking at the value of these human-nature relationships, temporally and spatially and culturally and socio-environmentally as well. I think there's resources within collections to do that really well, to do that in unique and innovative ways. I think you can do that by creating space for cross-cultural understandings of sustainability across the regions and globally as well. And I think we can do that by creating opportunities to think about well-being, health, and our environment in more complex and networked and multidimensional ways, and all the ways that I think the SDGs is trying to get us to do. But I think there's resources within collections to really bring that to life in quite special and unique ways. And I think we can also do that through just embedding culture more fundamentally in the SDGs and showing how to do that and how to do that well, and embedding people more fundamentally in the SDGs and all their diversity, through just and ethical community partnerships, through solidarity building across different sectors, through thinking across different epistemic communities, through the building of new epistemic infrastructures that recognize the fundamental role of Indigenous, but also other local knowledges for pursuing and realizing the SDGs, through cultivating too practice-centered infrastructures that recognize and enable Indigenous and other sustainable socio-ecological practices and also futures. And then, of course, through the development of different kinds of systems that build opportunities for communities to speak, to be heard, and to pursue and realize sustainability on their own terms. And I think there's a couple of ways, exciting ways that this could happen. I mean, there's this really interesting nature relationship index that the United Nations Development Program Human Development Report is working on for 2026. And so there's really interesting ways in which collections can think about how they might contribute to the story of trying to motivate better human-nature relationships at local levels, but also through engaging with local communities who are already developing their own well-being indicators related to the SDGs all across the world, across the Asia-Pacific region, for instance. So working with these communities and understanding the role of collections and realizing their well-being aspirations might be one way forward as well.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for this reflection. Now, moving on to Tatenda. Tatenda, from your experience knowing cultural heritage and AI, so what kinds of innovative partnerships can you envisage that would help collections-based organizations better serve diverse communities? And what would it take, technically, institutionally, and socially, to ensure that these partnerships are inclusive, ethical, sustainable, and also, effective? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jose. I'll start by maybe reacting to Inka contributions. So the first one, which is on the cultural silos, or rather the silos, where people in the cultural sector, the issue of collections is only known within the cultural sector. I think you'll be surprised to note that this issue is even known outside of the cultural sector. But I think what is happening is we are having some knowledge gaps, if I can say, or professional gaps, where people in the cultural sector, they just do their own thing within their own circle, and people on the other sectors, they're also doing their own thing, because I think they don't know who to approach and how to approach us in the cultural sector. So I'll give an example of one of most interesting projects, which is being done by a law graduate. So she's using cultural objects to demystify toxic masculinity, for example. And this way, she's using different collections to ensure that men can express themselves. So it's one way that we feel like in the process, it's bridging the gaps between equality, but also ensuring that men's roles are recognized within the society. Then I also look at the other aspect where you were highlighting on the need to generate data, a lot of data, which is quite interesting. I think it's very interesting. But also I think we need also to be cognizant of the fact that if we over-generate that data, who is going to be doing the follow-up so that we put that data into practice? So I think these are some of the issues that we might need to look at. And maybe just my observation is that it's either we have a generational knowledge gap, where people who are already established within the cultural sector, they have their own way of approaching things. Then people like us who are still, establishing themselves, we have our own way. So we need to bridge that gap to ensure that, there is a connection. And once that connection is built, it means that even people outside of the cultural sector can easily be engaged. So maybe to just come to your question, Jose, is how do we then, see these or envision these partnerships, in building the ethics within technology, ethics within, I would say also there is an issue of data governance. And I think I would also react to that in regards to the issues of having to collect a lot of data. We need also to be cognizant of these factors, issues to do with data governance and data sovereignty. So having to collect a lot of data, we might run the risk of ignoring these elements. So how do we view these partnerships? I would say, number one, from what I've observed within the technological sector, we have some innovative ways which are being developed, but outside of the cultural sector. But while they are being developed outside of the cultural sector, people are doing that. They are cognizant of the fact that we have cultural collections, but they do not have the actual knowledge that we have people in the cultural sector, right? That's the first thing. Then another thing is, while that is the case, we are now having a lot of biases which are being created about collections, because then we have separated the professional from the community. We have separated the technological expert from the community. So I think those are the issues that we need to be looking at to ensure that whilst we are doing what we're doing, we are going back to the community. And when we go back to the community, I don't think we should go back with our predetermined research frameworks. It has to be co-produced. We have to be working together with communities, because they know their data more than us. They know what they want their data to be used for. So it's more like now we are running a risk of us going to the community with what we want to collect, then coming back again and come back to those communities, telling them what to do with their collections. So I think those are the issues that we need to look at and ensure that we create a balance, if I can say, So within the area of technology, as long as we have that thing, we are going to continue having a lot of biases. We are going to have a lot of misrepresentations of cultural objects within the realm of technology. And I'll tell you that AI, for example, is running at a very fast rate. And if us in the cultural heritage, we don't catch up, we are likely going to lose it. That's how I see it. And I think it requires us now to work together. That's where we look at the SDGs of partnerships. How do we build these inclusive partnerships to ensure that we achieve these goals? So yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Tatiana, for these powerful insights. Lots to think about. So if we move now to Alexandre, from your perspective, in the work that you do through IIED, so how can we embed collections and collections-based work more firmly into broader development strategies? So what kinds of intersectoral partnerships would you see, from your perspective as most powerful, and what mechanisms, such as funding, policy frameworks, evaluation tools already mentioned, would be needed to support and scale them? And then also importantly, so how can we better gather and communicate evidence about contributions of collections to sustainable development, especially in ways that resonate across sectors, maybe taking into account also the points that Tatiana raised about over collecting data. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jose, for that question. It's very interesting because a couple of the points that I wanted to discuss now, most of the previous speakers already alluded to them. So I think there's a lot of alignment in the messages that we would like to present and discuss with the audience here. So I will start with, to me, the importance of new and innovative partnerships. So just building on the example of this panel and what we discussed before, this intersectoral approach and intersectoral partnership. So partner up with unusual suspects, going beyond the cultural heritage sphere, and what can we learn from other sectors. We discussed the health sector before, but there's so many learnings and insights that we can learn from each other, even in terms of generating the robust evidence needed to demonstrate the impact of collections and collection-based organizations in achieving sustainable development. And I think when we talk about learnings, I think it's also important to highlight not only successes, but failures. Failures is an important element or aspect of learning. And we've seen what works, what does not work in other sectors. So how can we facilitate this cross-learning between the collections, the cultural heritage sector, and other sectors, and try to identify some of these insights and elements of what works and what does not work, so we do not need to reinvent the wheel. I think in terms of data, that's also a very good point raised. Of course, we need to generate data to support and have robust data systems and robust evidence systems that demonstrate this impact. But we also want to make that data usable, right? And something that we've been doing with IIED and other partners in other spaces, the climate and the biodiversity spaces have been raised before, doing monitoring, evaluation, and learning work to generate the evidence needed to influence and to push the right policies and to ensure that policies are fit for purpose to deliver what they're expected to deliver. So I think that's a critical element here. We can generate as much data as we would like, indicators, monitoring, evaluation, and learning frameworks. But then if we don't use that data generated to push and to influence policies that will ensure that will put collections and collection-based organizations at the heart of this impact in terms of the people dimension for sustainable development, there's no point in generating that data, right? If it's just sitting in a desk somewhere. So I think this link between data generation, policy influence, advocacy, I think that's very, very critical also. And that's something that when designing partnerships, I think it's also important to consider not only the data generation aspect. I think I've highlighted that before, but I just wanted to, because I think it's a very good example of one project that is bringing together these, let's say, different communities in the sense of more the cultural heritage community and the monitoring evaluation community. The project that I mentioned before, Tauched, where we're coming together to develop these robust and rigorous methodological approaches to generate the evidence demonstrating the impact of collections and collection-based organizations. And to answer your questions, Jose, I think that's probably also one of the mechanisms that we need to bring these communities together and promote these intersectoral partnerships, is maybe dedicated funding mechanisms or approaches that really inspire and encourage these different sectors and communities to come together and to make a much more robust picture on the evidence of these collections into sustainable development. I would also like to bring to the table this idea of communities, and this was discussed before, but our work really shines a light, also our work and our partners' work really shines a light on the key role of proactively involving communities in the processes that we're looking into. So we've been working, just to give you a couple of examples, we've been working with partners around the world on locally led approaches to nature conservation, climate adaptation, and developing the evidence needed to demonstrate the effectiveness of these locally led approaches to some of these challenges. And I think that would be a very interesting approach that we could think of also with collections and collection-based organizations, is how do we facilitate and promote these locally led approaches and the engagement of communities in really driving the agenda here, and how can we generate and share the evidence that demonstrates the effectiveness of these locally led approaches in this space as well. So I guess I will stop here, but yeah, my final point is I think the previous points from the previous speakers are very much aligned with this idea of going beyond the glass ceiling and kind of forging unusual partnerships to deliver on this. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Alexandre. We all often also speak about going out of our comfort zone, out of the heritage sector bubble. I think it's been reflected here. So we did not receive any questions from the audience, but I wonder if you have questions for your fellow panelists, or if you'd like to say any final remarks before we conclude, Inga.
Yes, thank you for giving me a chance. I just wanted to say that as we are maybe to continue a little bit on the topic of data and producing data, I don't want to seem as someone who is really like crazy for making more data. And I think I would rather represent a certain resistance in the cultural sector that also is very real, because there is like, you know, that tension between that requirement for data that are not based on the intrinsic value of culture, but that kind of require translation of that value into the values of other sectors. So we have to translate our actions into health outcomes, environmental outcomes, financial. We have to monetize everything that we want to do. And there is a certain conflict about that. And I'm very aware of that. But I think slowly the collection-based organizations and heritage sector as such is realizing and admitting that it's part of the dialogue. If we want to be heard, if we want those real cross-sector collaborations and cross-sector policies, we have to train this ability to produce also that type of data. So my suggestion was coming from that background.
Thank you. Crushu, any reactions or final points you'd like to make?
Just that I really liked what everybody said, but just on what you just said, Alexandra, about locally led initiatives. I think there's something really powerful in doing that, taking that seriously, and thinking about how that can solve a lot of problems, particularly the data problems that we're talking about now, by being community-led, by being locally led, by looking at a more networked approach to how this might occur, which probably resonates quite nicely with the organizations anyway in collections. So I think there's something really exciting about doing that, about showing how these locally led initiatives can have real global impact and how they can transform how we think about the SDGs. Yeah.
Thank you. Atenda, any final thoughts?
Thank you. I think maybe just to buttress also on the data collection and locally made initiatives, I feel like that is the only way for us to make an impact, because then you know the type of data that you're collecting from the people that are going to be using that data. So if they are at the forefront of co-designing the research strategy, the data collection strategy, it means that they are going to give you the raw data about how they view these collections and how they are going to be using them. So I feel like it has also to go beyond just the idea of collecting data, but also the user-based needs. So something that we also do in the area of technology, to look at the user-based needs. If I'm developing this framework, how is it going to benefit my user? So if we have that in mind, and not only with the idea of saying we want communities to lead, but in what way? So it's more like, I would also term it the decoloniality framework, where we have to decolonize, not within the framework of colonization, but decolonize out of the framework of colonization. So that's how I see it, where we need also to change the way we do our data collection methods, the way we view our communities, not only as people that are just going to be giving us information, but as co-creators and collaborators. That's how I see it.
Thank you so much. Alexandra, I know you just spoke, but maybe you have some final remarks and thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Jose. Maybe just 2 quick points from my side. The first one, I would like to react to what Inga just mentioned in terms of monetizing approaches, and I think that's a critical aspect, because some of the work that we've been doing with other IIID and partners is also looking into non-economic losses from climate change, and I think that's a critical element here for collections and cultural heritage when we're talking about, not putting a concrete figure in terms of dollars or euros or some other monetary currency. These are very critical losses that we don't put the figure into it, and I think that's very important to highlight in this context also. Just a final point also from my side, just to pick up on what Atenda was saying on these user-based needs. I think that's crucial also, because from our experience, putting the user at the front and identifying, kind of doing this needs assessment, that also creates ownership and allow us to shape and influence either policies or strategies or programs that are actually fit for purpose and that take these needs into account, rather than being developed in parallel. And then most of the times what happens is, when these programs are implemented, they face backlash, or they're not fit for purpose because they were designed in an office somewhere that did not take into account these needs from users. So I think this idea of user-based needs is also very critical, and I would also like to highlight that. Thanks.
Okay, so a big thanks to our panelists today for your invaluable insights and engagement. So I think the perspective that we shared here today will meaningfully inform the outputs, the recommendations of this conference, and hopefully help shape future action, bringing sectors together. I think this, although brief conversation, has been a powerful reminder of the potential of collections to contribute more to sustainable development, especially when we work together with intention and creativity. And we look forward, of course, to continue this dialogue beyond today. So a big thank you. And for those who joined us for today's presentations and panel discussions, but will not be participating in the breakout sessions that will come after a 10-minute break. So a big thanks to you for being part of today's important exchange. Your presence and participation have helped us shape today's dialogue. And we look forward to welcoming you back tomorrow for more thought-provoking presentations on the topic of collections and planet. So just a reminder for this part of the conference that is presentations and panel. So you use the same link as we used today. For those of you who are being registered for the breakout sessions, so we'll reconvene after a 10-minute comfort break, but using the dedicated Zoom link. It's another Zoom link that you have received by email to join the breakout session. So the session will be taking place in a separate meeting format so that it can be more interactive. So enjoy the break. And hopefully we'll see all of you shortly in the breakout sessions in 10 minutes. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you so much and see you shortly.